Hello world, my name's Hamilton and I'm a software engineer and creative technologist. If you're new here to the channel, basically I post a lot of videos about things that I'm building, how I built it, the process through that. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how I host my sites and scale it to around 500,000 users per month, all for free. So I'll be looking down a little bit during this video. That's just so I can see the materials, the diagrams that I'll be showing you in the video, putting that into post-op. So don't freak out. Let's get into it. Let's go through this diagram from right to left. Basically, the right is the innermost of my architecture. The left over here, where you see the laptop and the mobile device, those are going to be towards where the users are. That's where they're actually hitting my sites. So at the far right, we see that I have my GitLab repo. This is where my code is actually stored. And then from that repo, it gets pulled in through Netlify. They have a really good integration system to actually host my sites. As I mentioned, that's built on Hugo. It's a static site generator. I really like it. It's open source. It's pretty easy to use. There's a pretty good community for it. And I chose that because it has good templating, which is something I think is very important for any site, at least for the ergonomics of development. And the payload that it outputs is actually pretty small, particularly when compared to the standard payloads of something you might build with React or even with Next.js or anything like that. This is also a really good tool to use with Netlify, because Netlify basically is geared towards, at least right now, the hosting of static sites. So once you build a static site, which basically just means that it doesn't have any weird frameworks running in the background, you could just load it in any browser without having to load Webpack or React or any of the behind the scenes frameworks, and that'll just serve that for you. So that's good. The small site is important. I'll go into the size of my site a little bit later, but basically in my testing, which is very limited, my payload, because I'm using this, is about half the size of that of another site using React. So that's how my site gets served. Basically, users will come in, they'll hit my domain, they'll get ported off to Netlify where my site is actually hosted, and then they'll download my site. Now it's important also to mention that my images are served not through Netlify. I serve my images currently through Google Cloud Storage. It's basically just a static site server. I'll go into why that's important a little later as well. Okay, so now that's how I serve my sites. That's basically the core part of what goes on. Let's talk about how my sites are built. Basically, on my GitLab repo, I have a push trigger, and I also have a cron trigger. So what does this mean? This means that every time I push an update to my repo, my sites will rebuild themselves. So this is actually set up not through GitLab, but through Netlify. Netlify, I believe, has just a listener that's listening for the master branch, and they will just pull in the new builds or the new updates whenever you push. So that's super useful. I also felt the need to build a cron trigger, which is, cron is chronos, the time word, and that just means that it runs on a schedule. And I felt the need to do that because I'm using Hugo, my site generator, it doesn't have any trigger to update automatically, and because it only sits out a static number of sites, it's kind of impossible to create a scheduled posts without it. So that's how I schedule my posts. I can put them a week, 2 week, 3 weeks out, and then I have a cron that runs once a day, and it'll just pick up whatever is new, output it, and then Netlify, and then it'll hit Netlify's build hook, which will say, hey Netlify, I've updated myself even though there's no git hash, go grab that. So that's how I do that. And as you see in the diagram, it just gets pushed to Netlify, and Netlify just serves it like they would any other update. Cool. So I talked a little bit about how I was hitting 500,000 views per month, or I could scale to 500,000 users per month, but I have a big asterisk on that, so we kind of have to go in there. But at this point, that's really all there is to my sites, so that is how I serve them. That's just how I did it. But let's go into the numbers a little bit, because I want to make sure that people understand where this is coming from and what I'm actually doing and paying. So I don't actually have 500,000 users visiting my sites per month. That's like a lot. Really, in 2019, I had around 1,787 per month. Right now, it's a little bit closer to 2,400 for 2020, but it's only a few months in, so I want to wait till the end of the year before I actually do my averages. Also, I'm not actually serving my sites for free. I'm actually paying around 15 cents per month in 2020. My sites tend to be a little bit heavy on media, but I'm, also paying for this. So, okay, I said that I was doing this for free, did I lie? This isn't very nice, whatever. But I'll go into a little bit why I think this is actually still fair to say. So, if we look at what Netlify actually gives you for free and what you're paying for, or what I'm paying for, we'll see that I actually am serving these sites for free, even though I do pay money for it. So Netlify's free tier, which is very generous, basically gives you 100 gigabytes of bandwidth per month. Now, the only things that contribute to this bandwidth cap is things that are served directly through Netlify. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm serving my Hugo site through that. So that's, the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS, and any images that I'm serving, but only those that actually live on Netlify servers. Now, I mentioned earlier that all of the images and media that I'm serving on my site, or at least the majority of them, are actually getting served through Google Cloud Storage. So because that's not coming from the servers of Netlify, those actually don't count to that 100 gigabyte cap. Also, what doesn't contribute are anything like ads or anything that's I use Prettify.js to do code linting inside my website. So none of those things contribute. So when we actually go into the numbers, and this is what I was saying about going into my Hugo site's payload, each of my pages on average is about 107 kilobytes, and those are only things served through Netlify. So my pages can get a lot bigger. For instance, my 2019 review, probably 9.5 megabytes, so huge. But most of those are images and not served through Netlify, so it doesn't actually matter. So I went back and looked, and it's about 107 kilobytes per page load, and that's assuming that your cache is cleared and that you don't already have my CSS loaded into your browser. And then I also noticed, just from behavior of people in 2019, that most sessions involve about 1.74 pages. So when I put all that together, which is basically just saying, okay, what's the 100 gigabytes cap? How many views do we get if we do the 100 gigabytes converted to kilobytes divided by the 107 kilobytes per page load times the 1.74 pages per session? This is the number we get. And so we get that number at 533,000, which is a little bit above 500,000 visitors. And this is per month, because that 100 gigabyte cap on Netlify, that's per month. Now note that this is actually probably underestimating the amount that I could serve my sites. And that's because most people aren't hard refreshing. They're not clearing their cache between every page that they jump to, which means that of the 107 kilobytes, about 100, maybe 102 kilobytes of that is my CSS. That CSS probably will be already cached in the browsers. Browsers cache super aggressively. So this is probably closer to 750, maybe even 1 million, depending on how many times people are return visitors and stuff, but wanted to give a lower bound, so we were just saying 500,000 here. If you want to look at any more of those calculations that I have been talking about here, I adapted this whole video from a blog post that I made on my site about a month ago, so I have all the calculations there. You can look at it, read links and stuff. I'll link that below. So that's all I've got. I know that this was a lot of explaining the asterisks in my videos, but just wanted to be clear that this is actually what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I'm doing all of this for free, per se. But that's how I host my sites. If you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.